And you've just heard Belfast by Scarred Lip, which is the current single from the debut EP, Fairhead. And I'm delighted to be joined by Matthew Bakewell from the band now. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, hello. How are you doing?
I'm really well. I'm really well. And before we talk about the EP, Scarred Lip are a new band. What can you tell us about them? How did they come about? Who's in it? Give us the breakdown.
So, yeah, so that's a fun one. So it was actually conjured as a more of a solo project that and it was actually going to be I was going to record an EP and I was going to release that in a kind of just here's stuff, here's music. I've been effectively in hibernation for the pandemic. And that was it. And I'd kind of amassed about 15 songs over the years, from when I was 16 up until now. Um, that I thought, okay, these are mine. I'm going to keep them aside. Some of which actually were written with Nikki from Half Formed Things, that actually were considered for Half Formed Things album too, but didn't end up getting into the direction we were going in.
Right.
So I just basically said to the rest of the band, well, if we're not going to put this on the EP or the album, I'll take this for me. And then I think I ended up having a chat with Edwin from Half Formed Things, and I said, well, I'm going to commission you as producer here. It's going to be a bit of a different relationship where I'm going to basically say, here are the songs, let's do something with them. So scheduled a session or two, and it started making progress. And then, so this would have been around about Christmas 22,
Mm-hmm.
23. Yeah, 22. And over that Christmas, a very dear friend of mine, Kira, came over for some beers, and we're having a kind of general chat about how our year had gone, and she was saying that 22 hadn't been the best time. And I said, right, okay, well, why don't you come and join this band with me? Because I wanted someone who is a multi-instrumentalist, who could play piano, who could sing. And she had never done that before, but she had played in orchestra. She played, I think it's the Edinburgh Chamber Orchestra.
Right. Wow.
Also, sorry, a quick aside as well. She also played all of the strings on "To Live in the Flicker," the
Right.
Half Formed Things debut album, which her was basically her coming into a room and going, "Well, I could do this," and then Evan going, "Okay," and do that seven more times, but in different ways. And then he built effectively an orchestra from what she was doing. So, so that I mean that was just basically the kind of the start of it. And then fast forward till about February, I scheduled a session with Evan to start recording more, and Kira came in as well and was playing piano and stuff. And it was at that point, I think the two realities landed on me. One is, hadn't thought any of this through. None of the songs were really finished, and I had completely and utterly over the pandemic lost any musical talent that I may have once had. Um, if the demos ever got out from that session, I think that we're talking about the end of a career.
Right.
Um, just couldn't sing anymore. It had no sense of rhythm or time. I mean, the songs were kind of like as in like the music and the lyrics were written, but none of the actual what was going to happen was going there. And God love him, Edwin just kind of let it, like, I think but he was still very direct with him, going like, this, what are you doing? So I think I then ended up stepping back and going, okay, so what I actually need to do is get back to being a musician again,
Yeah.
and perhaps look at this as maybe a band. So I ended up speaking to my friend Tony Wright who was from back home. He was in And So You Watch You From Afar, who were a band who of note, and also he was in his own solo thing called Verse Chorus Verse, and I asked him if he'd like to come along and join, and then Kira just came to practice one day and said, "Oh, I've invited Gary," and I was like, "Okay, Gary." I don't know Gary. Gary comes to gigs and says hi. She goes, "Oh, he's a drummer as well," and I was like, "Okay, cool." And Gary arrives, and I think he had just been heard some of the demos, and he came in and went, and obviously, I think he was quite unsure. I think Kira basically told him, it was like, "Oh, just come down. It's a wee hobby band thing,"
Right.
because she's very good at lying for a good cause, I think.
Okay.
And she basically said, and he came down, and it was quite remarkable how he had taken what was in these demos. Edwin had actually built this mix between samples and live drums for the EP, and the vibe was a very kind of like late 90s PJ Harvey, soul wax kind of vibe. Um, but Gary came in and just reinterpreted it all as a live drum piece. And I was just immediate saying, well, would you like to join the band? It's still a hobby band. We're not really doing anything. And that we kept practicing, and Tony at that point was playing bass. And then I think we got to about the summer last year, and we just kind of realized that this was actually real. This was the thing that was happening,
Right.
and that, you know, the EP was coming, and I think I started realizing that this hobby band thing was it actually had legitimacy. And then, unfortunately, Tony just had personal stuff. He had basically just a lot of things he had to go and deal with, so he had to step away for a while. And in that period of time, we were practicing and realizing that there was obviously there was no bass, there was no additional kind of that cornerstone. So Kira then said, "My cousin's coming down. Cousin Donald's coming down." I was like, "Okay, Donald, cool." So I'd met Donald in 2014, the day of the independence vote, and there's a
Right.
photo of me with him and Joseph Pearce's. I'd not seen him since then, but I knew he was a lovely guy. And he came down, and I was like, okay. And he then again picked up his instrument, had been listening to the demos, and just kind of just straight went into it. And at the end of that practice, I went, "Would you like to join this hobby band? It's, you know, you're in." Um, and that just immediately just kind of made it snowball. It had gone from a thing that was an occasional practice and maybe and doing some serious work to going, right, we don't have to practice every Sunday. We need to book a gig. We need to do, you know, get ready for the EP launch. We have to do photographs. And it's just ended up back into a very seriously, you know, something I've taken very seriously, as opposed to going, I'm now in my mid-40s. I just want to take it easy. It turns out I just can't. I don't have the physical ability to do this. And yeah, and I mean, I think with you know with Edwin as a producer, and just kind of taking forward a lot of the stuff, it has just become very, very important to me. And as a group as well, it's become very familial, and everyone is, you know, got that, you know, it's like, you know, it sounds like silly little things, but hugging each other when you arrive at practice, and hugging people when you say goodbye, and it not feeling like it's a superficial thing, you know, it's gotten very, very close. And that's not, again, not what I expected. I think I had become kind of like a bit like, no, we're just going to get all business. But now it's just really, really good, I think is the best way to put it.
It is really good. I've heard the songs. I agree with you completely. Um, it's interesting what you're saying. I wonder if this is kind of cod psychology, so forgive me. But that thing about you saying I'd kind of lost my musicality and I'd lost that thing. I wonder if that's linked into taking it seriously. That you actually
Hmm.
had to say, no, I'm making a decision now. We are going to take this seriously, and then that kind of instinct or whatever it is comes, right back in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very much it. It was actually realizing that this wasn't something I could kind of phone in anymore. That I had to actually start getting back into a kind of level of musical fitness that I had just before the pandemic, when half-form things kind of just hit the zenith, and we were really kind of, we played that solo light show at Voodoo,
Yeah.
and I felt that the kind of the work that I had done in that period with Morgan and Edwin, of really kind of like putting each other under a microscope and saying, right, you can't just dial this in, you can't just you know, hope that it's good. You have to sit and practice all the time and get very, very sure of yourself. And I think that's what's actually, I've regained that absolute sureness of what I'm actually doing. I'm not necessarily saying I'm some sort of like virtuoso or anything like that, but it's just going, I know that I can get on stage and just do this now. And I've definitely found my singing voice again. That's actually, I mean, to be honest, that was also just the introduction of using in-ear monitors. It just gives you such a degree of security and kind of confidence, because you're not fighting against anything. You've got your own mix. And I think also the guys in the band, I just, you know, it's a bit of a, it was just one of those moments where I think I was singing something and they stopped and kind of said, you know, you're really good at this. And I hadn't heard that in a very long time. And it was just a very reassuring thing to hear, that, you know, people weren't necessarily just being nice. And, you know, because, you know, I've been to gigs where I've said to people, that was great. And not lying per se, but I think I was stretching the truth a little bit, because I don't want to be an asshole to someone and say, no, you're not very good. So yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it is actually taking it seriously, and actually knowing that it's not just something I can dial in or phone in. I have to really work at this. And everyone else in the band giving that same level of commitment to it, I think that just made me go, right, well, everyone's game has to just keep, it's not like competition, we're going, we just have to level up together.
That's really interesting to hear. And I do wonder if that thing about saying we're going to be a band rather than it being a solo project with people coming in and out, as you say, as a band, you maybe push each other to be as good as you can possibly be,
Yeah.
and improve in that way. But what I would also say is the songs, from what I've heard, are, you said these were songs that you've been working on for a while. Some of them, they're very personal to you. A lot about your own upbringing. Is that right?
Yeah, so the actual project itself started to really take shape when I found, and there were photos I'd maybe found in my mom and dad's house a good while ago, but I actually had them in a book. I've got a copy of the Hotel New Hampshire that I just read every year.
Right.
If no one's ever read it before, I mean, God, that book is like, I don't know. I know people have actually recommended it to, and then they phone me up and go, "Why did you recommend this to me? It has all of the most awful things." And they're going, "Because it's John Irving and he tells you horrible things in a way that makes it kind of like a bit, I don't know, disconnected or something." But
Matthew, I have recommended John Irving to people because I absolutely love him, and people have looked at me as like, "What the hell is this?" So
it's,
I really agree with you. I think it's amazing. I think he's amazing, but yeah.
yeah, it definitely, I don't, not saying that my own home life was as crazy, but I think that there was a connection there. I come from a family of, like, I'm my mom and dad, and then my four brothers were five boys, were the Bakewell boys. And there's a whole kind of unspoken kind of like language that we all have. And it's a very, very kind of big connection. So we grew up in a place called Ballycastle in Northern Ireland, which is this kind of very beautiful, picturesque seaside town. And so, yeah, so I found the book, and I was looking through it, and then these photos fell out, and they're actually these square photos. And the actual one of the main ones is that photo that's on the front cover of the EP, and two other ones have been actually used in the artwork for the singles. And it just kind of went, that's a whole other life I don't remember. Or it's as if I kind of left it behind. And it started this whole kind of strange mining process, almost like my brain went and started doing it and just started to recall all these things. And what it was like in particular to grow up in Northern Ireland in the 80s, which was, a very tumultuous time, but also it's also really depressing. I mean, I don't know if anyone remembers the 80s. They weren't very much fun. And I think I remember growing up in the 80s, people were going, well, at least it's not as bad as the 70s. And I'm going, in memory, actually, in hindsight, God damn it. Like,
Yeah.
the 80s were horrific. Um, and yeah, so that started kind of like coming to the surface, and I started kind of looking then back at this back catalogue of songs that had either been a version of them had been recorded with other bands, or there were snippets of them that had a lot of weight to them. And I started realizing that, yeah, that this was all very, very, very important to me, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. And then on top of that, you had things like Belfast, which is the most recent single. That was the start of that was in Half One Things, Nikki would just sit at the piano on occasion, and I think she was figuring herself out as a musician, and was figuring out how to write music. And she started playing this riff, and with me, lyrics tend to come very, very quickly and instantly, and whatever they are, they stick. I don't actually tend to rewrite that many things. It's mostly because it's phonetics. Whatever actually fits really well with the actual music, or the shape of the mouth, I have to then go with that and then figure out what the song means afterwards sometimes. But this line about, actually, the original line was, I wasn't going to be a lost cause. And that was the original name for the song. But it sat there at this point. I mean, it really was, actually. It's the line, walked away from the light and my eyes grew hazy, wasn't going to be a lost cause. But that was what it was. That stuck around for a long time. And then during, I think it was 2020, towards the end of the year, Nikki had then sent us a bunch of piano demos, and she then sent this, what was the piano for Lost Cause, or yeah, at the time was Lost Cause, and it had been totally, it actually had an entire, sections to it, and it just came so rapidly. And it's the lines about, but look, even when we were young, we felt so old, is very much in reference to, I think a line that runs through my family, but I think it comes quite largely from my mum, is that this notion that at a very young age you're going to die, and it's a very crushing thing when you're very young. And I got it, and my brother Cormac got it. My mum mentioned that too when I think I first confessed to her that, this was a terrifying thing. So it's kind of largely about being, growing up in the 80s and feeling generally kind of adult and very depressed about things. And then I think there's other lines in there that come from other sources. So my family still lives in Belfast, and my wife and I will sometimes go back and hang out, and we love it a great deal. But my wife said a very kind of very apt thing about Belfast, which was the sky is very low, and it just that then you bring out this line, under low skies we fall in line, which then you kind of, it's a very kind of neutral assessment of the troubles. I think you're kind of going, let's not get too political, but there's a lot of unavoidable subjects, or unavoidable lyrics about the troubles you have to kind of get in there, but you don't want to again go, this is some sort of specific, it's ever, what I mean. I'm trying now to be really careful about what I say there. But yeah, so, and then what happened with that was that it was, we brought it into Half Formed Things sessions, and me and Edwin and Morgan worked on it. But at that point, it was this very slow piano ballad, and it got drums towards the end, but it just never felt like where Half Formed Things were going, which was this very dark, kind of very, very broad and like cinematic vibe. So Belfast became this thing, and I think once we decided it was out, I said, okay, I'll take it. I'm going to do this with it. Then Edwin and I started producing, and it became a lot more. The drums became a walking rhythm, and there's a whole different middle eight and things like that. So it's just end up just being this. I think it's, as I said, it is the heart of the EP. It really does kind of represent all the things being tied together. Of course, then there's songs just about breaking up with people that are really sad. I can't avoid doing that. I just love writing breakup songs. It's it's just pop music is meant to be, in my opinion.
And now let's be honest about this, we're recording this before the EP comes out on the 2nd, and you've got a gig lined up at the Wee Red Bar. So let's presume that was absolutely, what a triumph that was. Great.
Yeah.
Should have been there. But are you going to play? Do you plan to play further gigs with the band?
Yeah, no, I think we're pretty much the plan is to try and start doing as much as possible. I think that we're going to try and do gigs with support slots and things like that, and see what's actually going on out there. I think we just want to kind of do this one gig to, first of all, Kira's first ever gig, so it's to kind of go, okay, well, this is what it's like. But I think there's, it's I think it's very different from, say, my first gig when I was 14, when it was just like everyone's amps broke, and then I think someone had a fight and then took a pee behind the drum kit. It's, everything's a lot more kind of adult and dignified these days.
So.
But yeah, but definitely looking to play more gigs. I mean, this represents the first time I've been on stage in 4 years,
Wow.
which is very strange for me, because it's definitely the longest departure I've ever had. The one previous to this would have been a couple of years. So I'm not actually sure who I am stage wise anymore, and I've been told that I can't revert back to the previous version of myself where I said terrible things to see how people would react. I have to still be a bit more, mature, and not try and shock people, which is fair, actually entirely fair enough. I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah, let's see if you can kind of keep that under control.
Yeah. Well, everyone's mommy's coming. That's the thing. Like
Yeah.
everyone in the band, because everyone in the band. Well, so Kira and Donal are both from back home as well. They're Irish, and Gary's from Glasgow. But people's parents are coming, so I can't make the majority of the jokes I was going to make, unless they say to their parents, come to them and go, you can't play with him anymore. He's a bad child. So yeah.
And now that the EP is ready to come out, I mean, you must be excited that that's the case. You've said how, the band have formed and how the songs have formed over this period of time. What strikes me is they sound like a proper collection of songs. It's not just, things that you've thrown on there just to include it. There's a kind of wholeness to the EP.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of that credit must go to Edwin for that. He's got a very keen ear about how this all flows. I think he looks at it, it depends. If I went to him and said I want to record a single, I think he would have gone, that this can be whatever it wants to be. But working with him as a producer, it's very much he looks at the whole thing and how it will flow together. And when he's working on even the final part of the mastering, he'll listen to each of the song and jump back and forth and go, right, okay, well, there's a through line here, so it doesn't feel like you're going different people recorded this, or it's, you know, it's a different band. Because if you ever do, I mean, there's a couple of albums I'm very aware of where they've thrown in a song that was produced by someone else, and you just kind of go, this is, it's like watching like a kind of bootleg of a film, and then someone's inserted like VHS footage. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the kind of like assembly cut of Exorcist 3, the one that the Legion. Just don't do it, because it's so jarring, because every time they insert a bit of like original footage, it was just VHS on top of the HD. It's like, and you can hear the VHS going, like it's this whine, and none of it's actually that good. So I think you always have to make sure that you're once you welcome people into it, that it has to be compelling, and you can't really make people kind of like aware that they're listening to something. They have to, you know, be absorbed by it. So again, you know, very much, I think Edwin kind of identifying how all this was going to be put together, and yeah, I'm unfathomably blessed to have someone like that in my life who has the patience to work with me and get the best out of me as well. It's, you know, it is, I don't think I'm ever not going to be grateful that he's taken the time with me to do these things.
And it has been a different relationship, producer rather than bandmates, which you were obviously in Half Formed Things. This relationship has been a different one, but equally successful.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. I think that I mean, I knew that he was going to be the person I was going to work with on this. Obviously, he had a choice; he didn't have to. But yeah, very much he will have from things. He still certainly kind of would call me on not bringing my A game. But this was very much more this, like, you know, I think him looking in very much in my interest rather than a band's interest, and going, right, you need to do this, you need to do this really well. And I felt that kind of all the time, going, right, I need to step up my game, because Edwin's doing this for, you know, he's doing this work, and it's always, I knew it was going to be good no matter what. But I genuinely, whenever I started listening back to stuff, the night I came home after we finished off mastering Belfast and listened to it, and actually it was like someone else was singing it. It just became very, just standing in the kitchen of my house, kind of welling up in tears, because it became such a bigger thing than I imagined. So, and whether people, you know, whether it becomes kind of well heard, it's kind of sometimes now slightly, not that I would love loads of people to hear, but these days sometimes it's just actually about the getting that end point and going, this is just wonderful, and I you know, I was part of that. Sometimes that's the payoff for me, like, and I think I want to hold on to that, because, you know, I think in my earlier musical life, I maybe would have done stuff for other people, or in hope that other people loved it, and that was the kind of almost sometimes the singular focus. Whereas I should be going like, no, I need to love this. This is my work, you know.
Yeah, and I think that comes across. It's a really interesting thing, that as it's more difficult to kind of get your stuff across, sometimes the making of whatever it is you do, whether it's music or, you know, books or anything, the creative process itself is something that you've really got to love and get to feed into.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know what a big fan I am of Half Formed Things. I was so excited when you got in touch and said you got a new band coming out, and wow, it really hasn't disappointed. I absolutely love it. Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really do appreciate it.
No, no, thank you very much. Anytime. There's more coming, by the way. We've written an album. We'll talk
No,
about
I
that
know.
later.
No, I was reading your press release, and it says that we've already got at least
It,
another EP's worth of stuff.
it took off. No, by the way, this is all like stuff that wasn't part of the plan. It just started happening. And Kira just decided to go, oh, by the way, I've just written all this beautiful music. Do you want to use that too? I'm going, yeah, 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 yeah. So it's all growing legs, and it's out of control. So I'm very excited.
So this is only the beginning.
Only the beginning. It turns out, yeah, not the plan, but it certainly is now.
That's excellent. And this is Scarred Lip and Dark Signs.